Namaste. Welcome to Mentor Podcasts. Mentor podcasts are essentially to demystify ideas for you, particularly ideas that we think we know, but we are totally drowned in jargon, rhetoric, and mere words. Sometimes, when you lean on the shoulders of giants, they help you demystify and give you the confidence to look at things as they are. And today we are going to meet a giant like that. I have great privilege in introducing S.V. Nathan. Nathan is a people leader who India loves and admires. Former Chief Talent Officer of Deloitte, past President of NHRD. There are many significant roles Nathan has played and continues to play in shaping human development and excellence. Nathan is a TEDx speaker, a prolific contributor of life truths and office truths on social media. You cannot miss that. And Nathan is a truly enabling influence on our psyche. When I think of Nathan, the descriptors that come spontaneous to anyone are gravitas, care, humble, humane, and a friend. Here, let's experience Nathan. Yeah, let me start with a big namaste, Nathan. Thank you. Thank you
Namaste.
for this. The mentor podcasts have been a thought that have come out of a need that I have constantly realized, which is there are many common ideas, including stuff like time, intelligence. But the problem is, they're so common, people are totally mystified about them. They have no clue what they really mean. So, this whole podcast series is about demystifying it from a practitioner's view. Okay, so that's
Wonderful.
the idea. And I wanted to take up learning in the organizational context. Okay, I mean, I have never seen anything described in so many multifarious ways. Okay, with no commonality or the whole context lost. Okay, so I wanted to talk about learning in the organizational context, learning and organizational effectiveness. That I thought, should be very useful for HR practitioners, learning and development leaders, quite a few of them. That's the idea, Nathan. Okay. I'll start with the $1,000,000 question. What do you think is learning in the organizational context? Is it knowledge? Is it a bunch of activities? What is it really? Just give us a little.
I'll put it in two frames. One is learning at an individual level and learning in an organizational context.
Yeah.
Learning to me is personal. Training is what is imparted,
Yeah.
but what is absorbed
Yeah.
and what is used by an individual, that part is learning. Anything that is imparted and then there is a person who's able to absorb it, assimilate it, that part is learning. Learning, sometimes we don't even realize what we are learning. And I'll come to that in just a moment. In an organizational context, learning is a sum total. Organizational learning is a sum total of all that people have learned. And all of these are intentional money.
Okay.
It happens sometimes unintentionally as well. Organizations sometimes don't even realize that they are learning a few things unintentionally. So two parts to it. Organizational learning happens with intentionality, which says this is what I would like our people. And many times we think that if there is a skill imparted, that is all about learning. Many times, along with skills, there are a whole host of associated skills which are also in play.
Perspectives too.
Exactly. And as people start to think about it, and the whole thing is about making meaning. To an individual, learning is all about making meaning. There is an amorphous stuff in front of you, and you start to decipher the whole thing. And once you decipher the whole thing, then it strikes you. That part is learning.
Perfect. Perfect.
So that's my 2 cents about it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. In fact, there's something that has bothered me over the last 27, 28 years. I've been associated with learning and development. I noticed that organizations place tremendous amount of importance politically on learning. I've never seen a single leader downplay the importance of it. On the other hand, I have rarely seen organizations spend, in India, the average is about 0.2, 0.3% of sales on learning. I found this contradiction very interesting. So I wanted to ask you, as a practitioner, I think no one better than you to ask this question. How would you describe the link between learning, quantum, quality investment, and organizational effectiveness? Can you throw some cases? Can you talk through how this works?
I go back to my sales days.
Okay.
It's easy to quantify.
Yeah.
I'll also come to some parts where you can't do this with the same ease and felicity.
Correct.
In sales, you bring people who are wet behind the ears. First, there is a lot about learning what a product or a service can do. And once there is some level of comfort about it, people go out and then they try their methods, they come back. It's an iterative process. That process can be either through formal learning in the beginning, formal training in the beginning. Learning happens on the job. Many times, in a month which was required to be where learning is supposed to be on steroids, that particular month you will normally find that the sales will drop because people expect that the translation happens very quickly. Take 6 months out, and then people start to see that there is something dramatic which has happened. X amount of sales has become NX. N could be 1 or 2.5, whatever. People, however, do not bring it back and say, if-then equation.
Okay.
So typically in a sales kind of an organization, you're looking at an output-oriented stuff. If you look at any of the services organization, they are pretty much on the same count. I don't think anything changes much there. If you look at engineering organization, they'll be able to quantify this to the last penny. It's a little more easier because then you're looking at, let's say, an assembly line, the time that it takes, the output per person, all these are highly quantified.
Correct.
But if it is learning, which is to do with soft skills, and everybody says it's a need of the hour, it's very important, but then the moment you bring in soft skills, you don't see that happen very quickly. Organization learning, therefore, if people are not able to see the equation play itself out very quickly, then there is a sense of, I think it's wasted time.
Yeah.
And everybody goes on a quarter to quarter and imagining that everything will happen on the fly. It doesn't happen, Mani.
Perfect.
It takes time. 6
Yeah.
months out, maybe even 12 months out, yes, you will be able to see quick results.
Yeah.
In organizations which are in the services industry, you can see perceptible change. But again, all these take time.
Correct.
Learning, therefore, in an organizational context is a sum total of individual learning and collective learning. The thing which is really missed out, and you pointed this out, if there is so much of interest, and it is politically right to say that we are a learning organization, then do we really, really mean it? For instance,
Yeah.
do we allow people to learn whatever they want? Or do we mandate that these are the skills that you require?
Correct.
I have seen a big change over many years, Mani. The single biggest change is the whole thing about the push and pull of learning. Earlier, you were pushed to learn. Today, your advancement is predicated by the learning you have acquired. There is then a pull.
Correct.
Earlier, there was a mandate. You do so many hours of training. Today, nobody much cares about the number of hours.
Correct.
They just want to know whether your learning has been able to produce the right kind of results.
So, is it a widespread manifestation in various cultures, Nathan, or is it only the erudite, top-rung organizations?
So, see, it happens in evolved organizations.
Correct.
And is not a function of whether this is big or small, because I think there are a lot of organizations which really mean well. They want people to learn, because if people learn, there's a very clear equation between learning and growth.
Correct.
If people learn, they grow. If people grow, they stay and contribute.
That's true.
And I will share with you a very interesting statistic. What we did was, we said, does learning play a part in people staying back in organizations?
Okay.
And I did this empirical study over a few years, and it was quite dramatic. If you take 100 people and you take a look at who are the people who have left, the number of people who have left or the number of people who have stayed back, 12 in 100 will leave if they are not trained.
Wow.
12 in 100 will leave if they are not trained, or if they feel that the organization has not invested.
That's very interesting. That's a very powerful statistic, Nathan.
Yes, it is. And therefore, it just means that organizations which have spent a lot of energies, many times we say, this is a good program to attend, and people go attend that program. You don't see a visible change instantly. You may not even see it over a period of time. But the unsaid is, because I have been asked to attend a program, the organization is invested in me.
Yeah.
What is that subliminal cost versus value that you have derived?
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting. I've always felt more than the logical connect or correlation between what happens, the emotional communication you do to the employee seems to make a big difference, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And something interesting occurs. If 12 out of 100 are leaving, which 12 out of 100 are likely to leave? Probably the more important ones are likely to leave if you don't invest in learning, right?
Exactly.
That's very interesting. But it brings me back to the question, Nathan. I wanted to take a slightly different look at how do leaders allocate resources, okay, when it comes to learning. I want you to talk about, since you would have been privy to how leaders think, when it comes to allocating resources to learning. I'm not bothered about the quantum or proportion of total and all that. in general, what is the mindset of leaders when they think about investing in learning? Can you throw some light on it? Maybe some stories or something, that'll make
So even
it
when you were
interesting.
speaking money, I was reminded of a gentleman. I'll call him Sanjay. I'm talking about manufacturing. Manufacturing, Sanjay was the apple of everybody's eyes. He was the most trained person ever.
Okay.
There's a nice training program which is happening in some faraway place. It's
Mm-hmm.
off for about 5 days. The person who would be on that list would be Sanjay.
Wow. Mm.
And Sanjay happened to be a person, we kind of grew up together in that organization. But
Mm-hmm.
I used to be really upset. Why is it that Sanjay has been chosen?
Okay.
And and you didn't know who to ask. One
Yeah.
day I mustered the courage and went up to his boss, who incidentally was leaving the organization after a long stint.
Mm.
I said, "Sir, can you please tell me why is it that you're partial to Sanjay?"
Mm.
And then he made a very off the cuff remark. He says, "I get a note from the training manager saying you need to send 3 people. I sent somebody who, even if he leaves for 5 days, will make no difference to my production." I
That's
said, "Thank you
interesting.
very much. I will not mention this to Sanjay." That was what it was
Mm.
almost 30 years ago.
Okay.
It is it has changed a lot now.
Mm.
If you're letting people know that you value them, such people are sent.
Okay.
So I see a perceptible shift
Mm.
saying, let's send this person because it's the most convenient thing and it's not going to hurt my business or my production in any way, my output in any way. So you send that person. That is slowly shifting because of a couple of reasons. One, people are realizing the value of the time invested. There are
Mm.
two parts to it. One is what you say is the cost of learning or the cost of training, which is one
Mm.
part.
Yeah.
But the more important one is time away from work is also quantified.
Yeah.
And um, I have known leaders who have become outstanding leaders because they take a conscious call saying
Mm.
this much hours of learning people will have to dedicate, and they lead from the front, which means they
Yeah.
would say, I need learning, I need
Yeah.
training in these areas, and they would go out and they will learn. The big shift that I've seen in recent years is I think people are looking at this more by saying learning is going to be important, it's going to make a difference to my business, and therefore in my interest I need to get these people trained.
Wonderful.
It goes one level more. When such people leave the organization, it pinches them even more.
That's true. That's true.
And one of the unintended consequences of attrition
Mm.
is the awareness or the learning that has happened in managers that it is important to keep a trained set of people.
Mm.
And that is the distinction. So the point being, people are aware of what is expected of them as leaders,
Yeah.
of them as managers, and therefore it is in their best interest to have a set of people who are well trained. Also, the whole, if you take technology, for example, it changes almost 6 months to 12 months. Anything that you have learned in the last few months suddenly becomes, um, well, passe. It's
Mm.
not something. The important point there is it's not like the learning vanishes
Mm.
or the methodology has changed, except that instead of learning one language, you're now learning a new language or a
Correct.
new way of doing things.
Correct.
But if that is the need, then the investment in training goes even more than what it used to be.
Absolutely. In fact, another interesting conundrum or irony that has often, made me kind of laugh is who owns learning in organizations, So in the last 2.5 decades of engaging with my customers, okay, all my customers are invariably HR managers, learning and development managers, and less frequently some C-level leaders. I have always asked them this question. So, who's going to own this? And I actually hear a deathly silence for a moment. I want you to talk about that, Nathan. I think in a more philosophical context, who should own learning? Who actually ends up owning learning? And why has this conflict, been around in businesses for a very, very long time?
Learning is owned by the business. There's no doubt about it.
Mm.
This nugget of wisdom
Mm.
is more pronounced in recent times.
Okay.
Leaders are acknowledging that this is the one that's going to make a difference to their own businesses.
Mm.
They own learning.
Okay.
However, the methodology or the operative parts of how to get this done is then delegated to a function called learning and development.
Yeah.
Learning and development does precious little to help individuals learn or develop them individually.
Correct.
It's all done by the leaders. Therefore, for instance, if you look at Deloitte, one of the things that we do very consciously is every learning program will have a facilitator who is a business leader.
Okay.
Every learning program. If it is a 3-day program, you'll have, if the person cannot be available 3 days, then break it into 6 leaders, but they have to be present.
Okay.
And the being present is important, which means you don't walk around with your cell phone and say, there's a client and I've got to attend. Nothing. Because then you are up for everybody to see, and they're all going to be looking at you and saying, oh, is this the kind of leader that I'm going to become one day? So leaders are on their very best when they come in. Of course, we also take note of who are these leaders who engage so much. The best of businesses, the best of leaders will come to help facilitate.
Wonderful.
That's important. Because, so clearly what you're doing is this, the subtle message in the room is it's owned by your leaders. There are facilitators. There are people in the room will help make this happen, which is your learning and development manager. And of course, whoever that you have as your facilitators.
Wonderful. I've always felt learning is tripartite. I mean, it can never be, bipartite, or cannot be a contract between the taught, or the one who teaches. So that brings me to another interesting, question. I've been meaning to ask this to someone like you. In the last 27 years, roughly about more than 1,000 odd clients, that I have interacted with, I have found only a tiny percentage, I don't want to name it, it could be in single digits, very tiny percentage of my clients, particularly leaders, engaging with me in the design of the program. And this has bothered me quite a bit. I think they'll be very happy to tell me the requirements. But I have very rarely seen them ask me, all right, this is what I want from you, but can you please explain to me how you hope to achieve that? For example, is there some science? Do you have a hypothesis? You say you're going to make my people sell more. I mean, is there some science? Is there something? Are you going to change their behavior in some way? People don't change their behaviors easily. What are you going to really do? I mean, I've never, seen that. And I also want to contextually mention this. There was a little conversation I had with Dr. Kirkpatrick in 2008-9. And I think that was the 50th year of his model. And I remember asking him, what is your biggest regret in life? And the response was that I never designed this model for measuring learning. Okay. So he in fact made this fine point. He said, I said, do not, measure level 1 to level 4, design level 4 to level 1. Okay. So that was the engineering approach. My question to you, Nathan, is I think if there are some insights that happen to leaders, that'd be fine. Why are leaders finding it difficult to engage in design of learning or engage in leveraging learning?
So I can talk about our context. I'm talking about, well, of the several companies that I've been through, the one where I find learning and development, where there is a fair amount of engagement and where it is evolved. When we design training programs ourselves, we try to do as much as possible, unless it's a technical learning or a functional learning, then we would bring in experts from outside because no person is expected to know everything. So let's say it's we do something called the milestone program.
Okay.
A milestone program is a person, when he's an assistant manager, is getting promoted to a manager.
Correct.
Or a manager to senior manager to director, director to partner. So all these are milestones. A milestone program is normally a 3-day event. It takes about 6 to 8 months to design that program.
Correct.
And it takes another, possibly the same amount of time to revisit that program and say, this is how we will now have a version 2, 1.2 or 1.3. Every version will have the same. People who are invested in that, the learning and development leader, there would be one partner from the business. And of course, people from human resources are also engaged. And their only task is to make sure that they put together a program. The partner who is involved in that, the business leader who is involved in that, is a very senior person. And what they would do is they would devise the program, and the program will then be tested.
Okay.
The process of testing is also to check whether there is anything that is being left out.
Okay.
Processes are defined to a point where, for instance, in the evening, there would be a dinner. That dinner is not the very casual wine and dine and then go to bed. No. That evening is designed where you have a lot of senior leaders coming in from the organization and spending time with, let's say, the 100-odd people in the room. And there is a message. The person who is invited there would be a very senior person. He would take about 5-10 minutes. The accent is not on saying, this is what you have learned. But this is about how do you know who are the others? What is the process of networking? We get people from all over. We expect that these would be people who will know how to engage with leaders. Now, this is not taught, but this is learned.
Absolutely.
So that's the reason why part of this learning happens almost like it happens so moto, on its own.
Correct.
So you ask me the engagement of leaders, very highly engaged. But do all leaders engage? It's a little difficult, because you will find that if you're running an organization quarter to quarter, then it becomes very difficult for a leader to say, I need to be here, I need to do this. And it's almost like a tick in the box, and we go, but here's an investment of time. There is a version control. So somebody comes in, they do this, they run this, and they say, okay, this is a draft version, but don't let the people not know it's a draft version. Then they come out with the final version. Now, these are all milestone programs. Like this, every single program, Money, is designed having the leaders in the room. If you don't have the leaders or the business leaders in the room, then very often, for example, you talk about negotiation skills. We can have the best negotiating skills teacher in the world come in and speak to a set of people. But if you don't have their own bosses or people who are part of the business, part of this is also an apprentice culture,
Correct.
which earlier was one-on-one, is one to many today. And this is what is happening in organizations right across. So how do we put things in a very subtle way, push to a number of people in a significant way
Correct.
that people are able to observe? I see that changing.
Wonderful.
And particularly in places that are growing at a rapid rate, such luxury of learning is difficult. You look at the startups.
Correct.
Startups, they want people with this particular skill. They cannot engage. They anyway do about 12 hours to 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
Of course, part of that 14 hours a day, I think there is something that happens during that working, which is learning in the flow of work.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, you're making this is beautiful. The supervisor's job is not to supervise, but to facilitate learning so he doesn't have to supervise. I think that probably is getting in, right? I think the control craving is going away probably slowly. Yeah.
Not slowly, Mani, I would say the world was surprised when during the COVID days, when everybody was working from home, there was the supervision. There was the supervision. You won't believe it. In the first of the COVID, productivity went up by 10%. Of course, that happened because I don't think we knew how to, keep boundaries of time and all that. But coming to the point, the great point that you made is supervision has come down dramatically, which also puts a pressure on managers. Because managers, many of us, and I include myself in that, we like to manage, which means part of that unsaid is about control.
Yeah.
So we'd like to control. Now, that control element vanished at a certain point in time. And I think it's now slowly coming back, but people are recognizing that a little bit of latitude is required.
Yeah.
And therefore, the biggest learning of that COVID era, personally for me, was if you let people do what they do, they will learn, they will collaborate, because it's not the content which is a problem, because you have thousands and thousands and God knows how many thousand programs available.
Yeah.
It's about context.
Yeah.
What's the context in which you're learning? What is it that you're learning? Correct. And therefore, we're making a direct correlation between learning and growing. What is it that you will learn which will help you grow, both as a person and as a profession?
I totally agree. More than a tangible connect, it's an emotional connect. I think it just hits inside you. That brings me to another context, Nathan. I'm a metallurgist by training. I have studied materials, and one humbling thing I've always learned about materials is you cannot force anything on them. You have to align the forces so that they come together. Okay. And I don't find human beings any different. And I've always wondered, when you were in school, the parental involvement, was so subtle. Particularly in our times, the dad never really bothered, and he never came and checked what you were doing. But you always had a feeling that he was there, and you owed it to him, to do well. One. Second interesting thing I notice is that in any kind of learning, whether it's technical or whether it's complex behavioral stuff like leadership or negotiating, 100% of the time, testing out and actually learning what was taught, is not in the classroom. It was always in front of the supervisor or the manager, right?
Very true.
And here is where this irony strikes me. Why are organizations finding it difficult, okay, to embed in the managers that your primary job is to allow trial and help people learn, and
Yes.
sponsor the trial and put a safety net underneath? And I have found that very difficult. I mean, it has not been an easy thing to achieve as a external service provider, okay, because yeah, you get what I'm saying, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And as you're speaking, the mental model that I had was somewhere along the way, we forget a few things which came very naturally to us.
Yeah.
When we were toddlers and we learned how to stand on our 2 feet, we see the babies walking, and we did this, I'm sure, some several years ago. We fell. When we fell, possibly we cried, but we are back on our feet, and then we taking those baby steps. We learned to walk. One day we learned to run. But there was always a mother, there was always a father, there's always a support which was around you.
Mm.
Very few organizations today have the tolerance for failure.
Yeah.
So the TOF quotient, if it is in some way defined differently,
Mm.
and if that tolerance were to be really expanded, and you say, okay, I'm going to allow for this kind of tolerance,
Mm.
then you will find organizations really flourish. I met a friend of mine. He used to work with me several years ago, and he currently works in Google.
Mm.
And one of the things that he said was, we'd like people to learn on their own,
Mm.
and we'll only provide a context.
Yeah.
We will provide all the infrastructure. It's
Yeah.
up to them to learn.
Absolutely.
And I very recently I met another gentleman, and he was working a lot in the area of AI.
Mm.
And I got very curious, and he's working for one of the leading chip makers of AI. So when I spoke to him, I said, "So tell me, how do you do this?"
Mm.
And so to which, first of all, he was talking about how AI in itself is going to be transformative in this learning environment. But more importantly, the point that he was making was, in his own organization, the rule was, if you have to fail, fail. No
Mm.
problem. We are there about you. You fail fast, and we will pick up the threads very quickly. If you have to fail, do this very fast. And if you make a mistake, raise your hand, because then we will know what is the area that we have to work on. I found
Absolutely.
that very fascinating because he is one of the leading, let's say, voices of AI. And
Mm.
for him to make that statement was, to me, rather staggering, because organizations, will they allow for this? He says, yes, it's important, because if they didn't do this, and then there was another statement that he made was, people fail in any case.
Mm.
Don't expect everybody to succeed. People will fail, except that you will not know about it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, funnily, I went back and tried to reconnect with the top three rankers of my school classes and bottom three rankers. Same way I did it with the college top three rankers and bottom three rankers. It was a revelation to me. The bottom three rankers were so ahead in life,
Oh, yeah.
and they were so joyful in what they were doing. And I asked them, what is it? He said, look, I never was afraid of failure, was the answer from him. And that was a remarkable learning for me. But that brings me to in fact, you led this beautifully to this question, Nathan. Why are organizations still struggling to make their managers view failure differently and not judge it?
in some ways, there is I'll use a strong word, there is a double speak.
Yeah.
What we
Hypocrisy.
do is we say there is a performance management program.
Yeah.
Performance management program possibly is the reason why many organizations have people who work with them who fear to fail
Yeah.
because they'll be evaluated, they'll be judged for it. So, on one hand, you will say, we love people, we would like them to do well, and certainly if you have to fail, fail fast. We make all these nice pontificatory statements. On the other hand, you still, when the rubber hits the road, it's about, hey, how many times did we fail on this? What happened? And I don't think we do a good job there, Money. Our problem
Totally.
is our problem
Totally.
is so people have the fear of failure. If there is a program that says, okay, 10% of your performance
Mm.
is math.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. It's all gone. So I'm going to be looking at only that 90% hours, or define
Mm.
that number of hours where
Yeah.
I'm going to be looking at you. And
Mm.
you select which have been your best.
Mm.
Then you're looking at, this is my interest. This is where I do well. And this is what I've. So I had a very, very interesting mentor. He was my
Mm.
boss.
Mm.
Every performance appraisal, uh, my first one was one where I had written on a whole host of things just to let him know how much I have worked very hard.
Mm.
The first thing he said was, put that aside, let's have a chat.
Mm.
And every year, of course, at the end of that 1 hour, 1.5 hours, I'm not very sure. Um, when I left that room, it was a very calming effect.
Beautiful.
And all the time he asked me, what have you learned?
Mm.
And when you say, what have you learned? You say, what have you done well? And I will talk about the sun, moon, and stars that I've been able to align, and this
Mm.
is what got done. I
Mm.
said, okay, so what have you learned? And the way that he distilled that was, by the way, not for him,
Mm.
but for me.
Correct.
Learning, therefore, was, if something has gone right, how did this go right?
Very nice. Very, very nice.
And equally so, he said, I'm sure you must have faltered a little bit. Yes, indeed, I did, Ravi, I did. And said, so what have you learned?
Mm.
And and then you start to look at yourself. He was not judging you.
Yeah.
He was only making that kind of conversation, that meaningful conversation around learning
Yeah.
is not what happens most times. Even if
Oh,
all of this has happened,
totally.
organizations then sit down and say, okay, good, bad, ugly. I got to put a bell curve around it. I got to do this. I got to do that. I'm not saying anything is wrong. I've not, in my 40 years of working,
Mm.
found any performance management program which is foolproof.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I think they're only enablers, and therefore, I think it's important to have a good dialogue. Learning, that's why I have a lot of respect for people who ask this question, what have you learned? And
Mm.
the other one is, we have no idea what we want to learn.
Correct. Yeah.
We have no idea. And
Absolutely.
therefore, a big question. And well, I followed all the Kirkpatrick model, and I used to sit down. And there was one very, let's say, evolved leader who then went on to become the chairman and so on. And when I used to have dialogues with him, it was always at about 8 o'clock in the morning. And I used to go and ask him, and then he would have a pile of cases of individuals.
Mm.
And then he would talk about how learning has really helped this particular individual and what more could be done.
Mm.
Those kinds of enabling, energizing, invigorating, enlivening conversations are the ones that can make a difference. That requires investment of time, money.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Very, very nice. That actually brings me to the to the nail, not on the coffin. This is so cultural, Nathan, isn't it?
Yes.
And therefore, I've always wondered, how does HR as a function, how does it sell learning inside organizations? How does it prepare itself, okay, to sell learning or promote learning? And that involves, quite a bit of change in mindset. For example, for your supervisor to recognize that he needs to give you that time, okay, and make you even think about flying. You will never even attempt to fly unless you know that there is a net underneath where you can fall down, right? Okay.
That's
That is the thing. So tell me more about, the role of HR in L&D over the last, few decades, okay, that you have seen, and how is it evolving?
um, there has been a significant shift before after. The
Mm-hmm.
earlier one was about selling.
Okay.
I would say, I think your people need this, and
Mm,
therefore they need this team building from outside. I can see this, and I can bring in performance metrics, and I can talk about performance of leaders and so on. And you start pushing it. The moment you
okay.
start to push something at a business leader, immediately, as is normal, you start to prepare a wall.
Yeah.
It just will not work, money.
Okay.
Today, the conversations that really uh, brings home the bacon is when you have a conversation with the leader, says, okay, so what are the people issues that you have in your business, and
Mm,
then slowly move that on and talk about what is the root of that particular issue, or
mm,
where does it really reside. And invariably, it'll come down to say this individual, that individual, and start to aggregate and say this is now a learning that
mm.
is required, because then you're looking at a collective learning. Now, there's also something that you learn from the business as well, which is earlier, one size does not fit all.
Correct.
The same quantum of learning, it's like all of us have different appetites.
Correct.
And also, as you, an athlete will eat a lot more than a person who just goes for a normal walk in the morning.
Absolutely.
So,
Also the kind of food.
absolutely. And in which region are you in? Are you likely to eat a certain kind? So, learning, therefore, has now become highly personalized as well.
Yeah.
So, can you have mass learning, which is personalized? So, mass personalized learning is the way forward. Today, we try to aggregate that. But again, if it is as a dialogue with a business leader, it goes a very long way. It goes a very long way because then they start to get invested. So, the earlier sell is now roles are reversed. HR starts to buy some of the issues that business see in people, and what are the deficits, and you
Mm,
aggregate that and say, do you think we could have a program here? Do you think that this is a model that can work? And by the way, will you partner with me in
mm.
designing a particular program that will help
Yeah.
your business? That is customization.
Beautiful. Beautiful. In fact, that for many years, I ran this program called Learning Engineering
Uh-huh.
for Genpact.
Uh-huh.
Genpact used to run a program for their global operating leaders, and I mean, it was very interesting for me. I was so happy that I get to teach learning engineering for operating leaders. One of the most powerful statements that came through from most of the participants is that I'm so happy I was part of this money. I learned two things. One, I recognized how much I can change performance if I change capabilities of my people and if I design them myself. Okay, that was one. The second interesting thing that, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. To do that co creation, one needs to learn persuasion, one needs to learn empathy, one needs to learn, do that. And do you think HR is getting there? HR is learning these skills?
Um, I'll keep you honest here. I don't think we are doing a very good job there.
Okay.
We're not doing a very good job. I think we still have some distance to cover.
Okay.
And this is part of my learning as well. So these days, I look for people who are in learning and development, not coming out of schools where learning and development is more aligned with, let's say, a stand-up trainer who has evolved, to taking somebody from the business and who has been a very successful person and who wants to try another very different thing and who has a interest in imparting their knowledge, perhaps their experiences. More importantly, these are people who are almost like horse trainers. If you want to train a person to ride a horse, not everybody can do it.
Totally.
So there are people who can do that, and they are much valued. It's very difficult. So once you get people like that, and they are also very cautious because they do not have, they think they do not have all the knowledge that is required by an L&D professional, and therefore that osmosis is a lot faster.
Right.
So a good mix is having a lot more from the business coming in,
absolutely,
and people coming in from outside, because here you would have people who are OD specialists.
Correct.
But here are people who are OD directors.
Absolutely. I think that's the key word, Nathan. In fact, one of the funny things I find culturally is that we have a stereotype. The teacher is supposed to be a hero.
Yeah.
But in reality, if you look at it, if you put on a process lens and see, the teacher is not a hero. The teacher is a director of the film. The hero is the person who is learning.
The individual. Right? Yeah.
And maybe HR has to learn to change this stereotype, right?
Exactly.
Very, very nice. Wonderful. Time is flying, Nathan. We are already close to the last 5-7 minutes of this.
Sure.
So I want to ask you two very pertinent takeaway questions for the viewers of this podcast, which I assume will be trainers, HR managers, L&D managers, leaders. What do you think really are the practical challenges in running a good L&D show? Meaning, choosing to invest in the right place, run it, execute it. Okay, so if you were to pick the top 3 challenges, and in your view, how to kind of deal with them?
I think one of the struggles that L&D always has is a self-belief that we can make a difference. I think L&D leaders, we need to have it within ourselves, almost like a passion which says, it's not about running a program. I ran. You look at the number of hours that you have done in a year vis-a-vis the previous year is not a predicative of success for the future. But really working closely with the business. The first challenge is, how do I change my mindset? And what are the metrics that I'm going to chase, which will make a big difference?
Beautiful.
I think that's the first one. The second one I would say is our own ability as training leaders, people in charge of L&D functions, is how do I really work with the business leaders and get their buy-in? If I didn't have that, so all this thing about this pool of money that you have as your L&D budget. So you'll have statements which comes out in the executive. It says, this is going to be a transformational year for us. This is what is going to leapfrog. And this is going to make a big difference. And then the leader then says, apropos to what is required of the business, do we have sufficient investment in learning and development?
Okay.
So our own ability, so that's a challenge, Mani, because all the time you'll have a COO who is there, who is like the numbers watchman, who's looking at, hey, this you did last year, I cannot give you more than 10%. You want the organization to grow at 100%. Right? So why would you not look at this? This is not an investment. So our own ability to negotiate, our own ability, first have a faith in ourselves and start to, I think that's another big challenge.
Beautiful.
The third one, which I think is choosing the right people to come into the room. You choose the wrong one. I go back to my Sanjay example. This is the most trained person.
Yeah.
Why? Because they didn't have anybody else in the room. I think as much as it is about getting programs which can be rolled out, are we getting the right leaders to come into the room? Our ability, that will make a big, big difference. So you ask me, these are the challenges. If we address well, it can make a quantum difference, a big leap in our own effectiveness.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that brings me to the last question, Nathan. Going to be the toughest one. In fact, this is $1 million question for many people. Okay. How do you really evaluate the return on investment from learning? A lot of people go bonkers. Okay. And I'm sure, there are really no perfect, foolproof answers to this question. But philosophically, if you were to advise a leader, how should one look at return on investment from learning? I mean, I know your flair for truths. So, what is your truth that you want to give people about how do you see return on investment from learning?
First of all, learning is very peculiar. I recently I went to Hyderabad after a gap of almost 6 months.
Okay.
As I was driving down from the airport, I suddenly realized that the number of high rises that I see around have kind of tripled or possibly even quadrupled.
Yeah, particularly the airport road, yes.
They completely changed.
Yeah.
And as I was coming back, I was saying, is this the nature of change?
Yeah.
Because between an intention which says, I will be one of the best cities to do business, the ease of doing business.
Yeah.
If this is going to be important to me as a government, then do I have my infrastructure in place? Do I have this in place? Do I have the best of talent? Am I able to? All this you cannot put in rupees and cents. You will never be able to evaluate it. I think directionally, if you are looking at true north, learning is about the true north.
Yeah.
Learning, if you try to put an equation, and Mani, you're a metallurgist, I'm a mathematician. I mean, I schooled in mathematics, and for the life of me, I've done my best, but I think there is no clear equation there. I'll tell you a story and then I'll close. Years ago, I worked for a British multinational, one of the best. Everything was quantified, and we used to have a running battle as to how we get our learning and development programs run. They chose only the best, of course, and people came only from the IITs if they had to be managers, if you have to have anybody from human resources, any field, they would choose the best. They would go and pick people. At the end of 12 years, when I left them, it occurred to me that do I take the best of people and do I get the best out of them? I then joined another organization where it was very difficult to even attract people. It was in the services field.
Yeah.
And very, very difficult. So after a good two, three months, I sat down with my learning and development leader and I said, half the people that we have are people who are just about managed to clear graduation. And we hardly have a lot of MBA people around. Why don't we create an MBA program? We ran a program called Core Management Skills. It was called Core Management Skills Seminar. 6 months out, this is for anybody, all the chosen guys, whoever wants to come in. And Mani, we ran this with a skeletal set of people who can come in and spend time with this particular group. There were about 50 in all. And there are a lot of very, very fine people. There's a gentleman called Nakiran. There is a gentleman called Johnny Joseph. Wonderful people. They really gave their life for this program, and they really spent days on it to make sure that this is of value. Because you're trying to squeeze 2 years of what you have learned in a business school and put this out to the bunch of people out there. 6 months passed, everybody cleared, and then I moved on. Many people moved on. Recently, I met the class of 97. And I kid you not, Mani, every one of them is a millionaire.
Wow.
Every one of them. Some of them multimillionaires.
Wow.
And I'm not equating this as people who made money, but really people who believed in themselves. And many of them were just about undergrads or people who many would start to think, hey, listen, is he really worth his salt? Is she really worth her salt? It's all about belief. The one that I is of being in the field is, if learning can help people grow, I think that is a task well done.
Beautiful. Very nice. In fact, all those people who came out of that core management skills school, they showed enterprise. That's the beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome, Nathan. As always, any conversation with you leaves me warm. Okay, so that's the signature of a Nathan conversation. Thank you so much. And I'm sure, like I felt the warmth, all the people who are watching this, would also feel the warmth, Nathan. Thank you so much. And thank you for being who you are. So nice.
Thank you, Mani. Thank you for helping the world with all the 27 years that you have invested. More so, a big, big congratulations. 20 years is a milestone.
Thank you.
So congratulations to you.
Thank
Members of mental learning who have also spent the same amount of time. I think you guys are very privileged to be working with a gentleman like Mani. Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And really, really believe that sometimes we don't realize the value that we bring to people, helping them transform. I'm sure 20 years ago where you started to 20 years where you are today, you can sit back and say, oh, I revel in the thought that somebody has really grown and they have learned something and they've grown in their own lives. So, Mani, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much. Congratulations. All the best.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Thank you very much. In fact, that's the celebration. We thought we'll celebrate it by giving more. Okay. And that's the idea. So nice of you, Nathan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.